Good evening, guys. Yeah, I'm just. Yeah, there we go. I had to.
Self-adjusted.
Yeah, I had to accept something. Yeah. Good evening, guys. We're back.
Are we all well? Hello.
We all good.
All good. Everybody well? Everybody happy?
Yeah, you're looking in tip-top form. You've been doing a lot of running.
Yeah, hell of a lot of running. Yeah, it's not good for my knees, and yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot more on weights because I'm losing mass.
Oh, yeah. I see. All right, I got you. But you're not losing mass on the old library shelf there, by the looks of it.
No, it's there's one or two there. Yeah, something to read for the weekend, I think. Yeah,
and that
Kindle.
And your new book is what? Sins
of the Fathers.
Sins of the Father. Look at that cover. What a lovely cover.
Sins of the Fathers.
Yes.
Yeah, very good cover. Did you do that, Colin?
Yeah, I do all Ash's covers now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust anybody else. And yeah, you should see the
I can see why. Good. And have people been good on the uptake?
Yeah, and the reviews have been lovely on it as well.
Oh yeah, I saw them.
It's been scaring people. A review from someone saying that they didn't want to read on because it was scaring them, but they didn't dare put it down. And yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, that's just what you want. Yeah,
the perfect review. And speaking of
things that when we redo the cover, we'll put some of those. We need to grab some of those.
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, especially when they're frightened ones like that. I mean, I had to say, when I did my beta readers on Blood Ink, someone actually said it gave her nightmares. So that went straight on the cover.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And speaking of scary, Edgar Allan Poe.
That's all right. So let's start this off going to Ash. This was Ash's pick this week. You haven't actually missed that many, Sean, because I've been massively busy coming up to the end of year stuff on university. So
absolutely,
Ash marking and all that, we've been a little bit infrequent. Anyway, this is Ash's pick this week. So Ash, what have we been reading this week?
This week we've been reading the Premature Burial. First person unnamed narrator describes his struggle with things such as attacks of the singular disorder which physicians have agreed to term catalepsy, a condition where he randomly falls into a death-like trance. This leads to his fear of being buried alive. He emphasises his fear by mentioning several people who have been buried alive. In the first case, the tragic accident was undiscovered much later when the victim's crypt was reopened. In others, victims revived and were able to draw attention to themselves in time to be freed from their ghastly prisons. The narrator reviews these examples in order to provide context for his nearly crippling phobia of being buried alive. As he explains, his condition made him prone to slipping into a trance state of unconsciousness, a disease that grew progressively worse over time. He became obsessed with the idea that he would fall into such a state while away from home, and that his state would be mistaken for death. He extracts promises from his friends that they will not bury him prematurely, refuses to leave his home, builds an elaborate tomb with equipment allowing him to signal for help in case he should awaken after death. And the story culminates when the narrator awakens in pitch darkness in a confined area. He presumes he's been buried alive, and all his precautions were to no avail. He cries out and is immediately hushed. He quickly realizes that he's in the berth of a small boat, not a grave. The event shocks him out of his obsession with death, and soon after, his catalepsy episodes cease entirely, leading him to suspect that they were a symptom of his phobia rather than a cause.
Very good.
Is that what we all read?
Absolutely. Yeah. How are we thinking that Edgar Allan Poe actually had a fascination with this? I would guess so.
He's one of my favourite authors of all time. I absolutely love Edgar Allan Poe. And his fascination with the grim, the ghoulish and the macabre are things that we like about Edgar Allan Poe because he was one of the firsts in so many things. He gave us the first detective story in a way, with Case of the Purloined Letter and Murder at the Rue Morgue. And it was from there that we can sort of like see Conan Doyle shaping Sherlock Holmes, gave us science fiction stories. If you've ever read The 1002nd Tale of Scheherazade that Poe wrote, it follows on from where the 1001 Tales went. He wrote across so many different genres, and when he does spooky, I don't think there's anybody does spooky better than him. He just seems to tick all the boxes, which is why I've selected this story. For me, it really, really works. The way that whole setup is at the beginning, where there's this historical case of it happening and this historical case. And the more I'm reading those, the more I'm thinking, this is really fucking frightening that this shit's going on.
And also for me, it was like, these have actually happened. So it puts you in that headspace.
Yeah.
You know, it's a clever way to do it, really, because then you can't question it, can you, really?
Absolutely. And it just sort of like, from the way he works it in, where you've got this narrator saying, it's happened here, it's happened there. That first one that he discusses where somebody's sort of like standing upright and practically falling out of the sepulchre. That's a horrible image, yeah.
Yes. And she was put into a vault, wasn't she?
Yes.
For 3 years. But she actually hadn't died. So she was in this state of unconsciousness then.
Yeah, and she came out, what was it, within 2 days, she sort of like revived and then fallen out of the coffin, but she was locked in there.
Yeah, oh, God.
Yeah. It's awful, isn't
nightmare. It?
Yeah. Nightmare is absolutely the right word. Colin, what did you think of this one?
My answer is a little bit complex with the whole thing. I thought the first half of it was great. And funnily enough, I really could see Edgar Allan's influence on your writing style for the first time, because the way that he used supposedly real world, I wasn't actually able to find those particular stories, but they sounded like apocryphal stories from the time. Yeah. Really did sort of like resonate with me in the way that you present the serial killers in Conversations with Dead Serial Killers. Right. And I thought that I could see that influence in the way that happened in presenting the reality and moving it in as a block rather than weaving it in. You kind of create it as a block and it becomes its own separate entity.
Right, that's me going home now. I've just been compared to Edgar Allan Poe, so yeah, I don't need anything anymore now. just going to go away and die happy.
Remember to turn the sound off as well, because we can hear that clapping noise. But I do appreciate Edgar Allan Poe's language. I think the way that he describes the macabre is absolutely majestic in the way he does it. But the second half of the story, when he's talking about his own fears, didn't really do it for me, I'm afraid. I found myself not aligning with him. I got the fear of being buried alive, the way that he presents the fear and the idea of being frightened. But I didn't really resonate with the whole sieges and all that kind of thing. I liked his elaborate tomb. I thought it was a wonderful idea. And there's so many wonderful ideas. That's why I'm saying it's complex, because it's not as simple as I didn't like it. Because there's a lot I did like about it. I just didn't like the conclusion and the way that second half structured in comparison to the first. I thought the first was great. It was almost like listening to, but actually when you mentioned the Arabian Nights, actually it's a bit like that. It was almost like tale after tale. I thought, oh, brilliant. We've got, what he's done is he's told a load of tales that sound like folk tales of the time of, oh, don't, be warned about dying in country villages because you won't be dead and they'll bury you alive. That I thought was fantastic and spooky and really, really scary. But when it got onto him and his fears, I lost the scariness of it. It just took away that fear for me. I'm not saying it's how it actually comes across, but for me, I think it's because it feels like as soon as you get a narrator talking that way, I almost get in my head, I know he doesn't die and I know he doesn't get buried alive because he's telling me the story. So it kind of where this beautiful setup, and it was just like, to me, if he'd carried on doing that with a couple more stories, or if he'd actually ended being buried alive, that would have twisted me, because that would have actually been not expected. But I was expecting him to walk away at the end, and he did. And so it fell a bit flat for me.
Yeah, maybe he was actually touching on his actual fears. Who knows?
Quite possible. I mean, being buried alive is just one of those.
Oh God! I was speaking to somebody. I stayed in a castle last week, and at 3 a.m. in the morning, I heard someone walking around for about half an hour with a hobble. So I had to ask the next day if it was haunted, and the lady said, "Oh yes, it's haunted." So she said, upstairs, there's a fireplace in room such and such, and the farrier or somebody that was obviously joined with the castle hundreds of years ago was buried alive in the fireplace.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, how could that happen? That's the worst thing that ever anyone could go through. But and then, of course, this book comes around the corner. So I actually visited that little room last weekend, just in my mind. Yeah, it's a frightening old place. But nonetheless, I think Edgar Allan Poe had... either he's very clever at putting himself in someone else's position, or it was his position for a while.
I think you could be right there. I mean, to go back to Colin's point before about the way the story ends and that part being disappointing, I get what you're saying there. I've got the same issues with Les Mis. With Les Mis, I think it's a fantastic story all the way up to when the policeman dies and has committed suicide, and that's where the story should end. Instead, you've got that dead cat bounce where it goes on for another fucking hour or so. With this one, what he's actually done, in my PhD, I was writing about how a horror story has got a typical ending where there's the ending of the story's finished, but it could happen again. It could come back. The monster does have another chance to attack. And I don't think the monster's got a chance to come back in this one. In this one, the monster has gone away. The fear of being buried alive has gone away. His catalepsy has gone away. There's nothing there to say, ooh, but it could still be out there. If you brought it back round and sort of like said, reading this causes catalepsy, haha, you're next. In that case, yeah.
Well, there's a certain amount of it where I've been watching a lot of pitch meetings recently. I know you've shown us a few of them. And I've got into them, and there's a particular phrase in it, and this is what it was. You know, I've got catalepsy, which is a bit like narcolepsy. It's a bit difficult to tell whether it was narcolepsy or whether it was some sort of epilepsy. You know, it basically he was having these seizures, and then at the end of it, it was relatively easy and barely an inconvenience. You know, it just
super easy, yeah.
that's where it kind of went for me, and I think part of it is I know it's first example or early example, and we've had this with other stories before when you're looking at that, and we've had the same problem with M.R. James, you know, where it's almost like they couldn't end the story completely dark, but mind you, Fall of the House of Usher ends in a really dark way, so it's not that Edgar Allan Poe can't do it or didn't ever used to do it. And like I say, it's just setup. I thought the setup was just so, and his use of language is just so beautiful.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful and clever because it seems like it's economical, but it's not.
No, he's not. He's so florid in some fucking places.
Absolutely, yeah. But the way certainly it was delivered when I heard it, I just thought, wow, like you could dissect like little sections and just applaud how clever it was.
Yeah, it's he's done an essay, and it's sort of like about composition and how he wrote The Raven, and he talks about his correspondence with Charles Dickens and all the rest of it. Fascinating essay. But one of the things in it that he's most remembered for is that he talks about unity of impression, and the whole idea is that a short story should be long enough to be consumed in one single sitting. If you've got to put the book down at any point, in that case, the real world gets in the way, and it sort of like destroys all of the scene building that he's been doing. But also, every word that's in there is built towards that unity of impression. So everything that he puts in there sets it into the tone of, do you know what? We're talking about burials, we're talking about corpse, we're talking about decomposition. We're going to all learn the word inhumation, and we're going to think, when am I going to get a chance to use inhumation? Yeah, I hope somebody dies soon so I can say, oh, when is he being inhumed? Yeah.
But even then, he did actually. It's almost like when he got to the boat, I get the impression that he got a bit bored of his own story at one point, because there's a moment, and you're absolutely right in the way that he does things. And there's always this thing that is a bit of a joke about H.P. Lovecraft, and that H.P. Lovecraft describes things as indescribable, an undescribable noise with an indescribable smell of an undescribable thing, right? And Edgar Allan Poe does that. He actually describes. He almost basically talks about schemata or schema, the idea that we already know what some things look like, so you don't need to describe them. You just need to talk about them. Like you just need to say a policeman turns up. You don't need to describe his hat and all that kind of stuff. We already know what Bobby looks like. And he does that with the boat. He talks about the birth of the boat and actually uses the line, "I don't even have to describe it." And it's almost like with everything else that he had described in that story, including the quick release switch on the, I mean, I loved the tomb, the ideas behind the tomb that he had going on. It was almost like every single "don't bury me alive" device that was ever created in the 1800s, he had in that one tomb. It was a Swiss Army knife of not being buried alive. Absolutely fantastic. But say they got to that point, then suddenly doesn't describe it. it was very strange. It's almost like somebody else wrote the end.
Isn't it funny how I guess there is a new ending to horror stories somewhere, but it's not been found yet, has it? Like a new style, absolutely brand new style.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the thing is with stories, we like to hear the same story again and again because
true, we do.
And if a story ends and it's not the ending we were expecting, and I think M. Night Shyamalan is a perfect example of it. Sixth Sense, brilliant film. That twist at the end, which the majority of us didn't see coming, you just think, my God, that was phenomenal. And that shat on the poor guy, so that every film after that, people are watching it going, well, I want a twist just as good as the Bruce Willis is a ghost. And you're never going to get it again.
No.
Which is so frustrating because, I mean,
I have a problem with flashback in a lot of ways of that. It's like Anne Rice with Interview with the Vampire. I mean, I love the whole vampire series that she wrote, and I think The Vampire Lestat is an amazing book. My problem with the Interview with the Vampire is on the first page it tells you that he's not going to die, and it takes away all the peril. So there are points when he's supposed to be in peril, and you know he's not going to die because he's telling you the story in flashback. And for me, and I know a lot of people don't suffer from this, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not saying it's a bad piece of writing, actually. I'm saying is that for me, as soon as I cotton onto that, it affects the way that I look at it because it's a mechanism that does that. And I suppose in this case, it would have been that different ending of, because I felt that he was going to be, at one point I thought, they're definitely going to bury him alive. And I thought he'd done it. I thought the bit when he'd got to the point where he was accidentally done all this stuff and then fell over in a place and they just buried him. So all the stuff that he'd set up, if it stopped there, I'd have thought it was one of the best stories ever written. Because that was shocking. That was completely, oh my God, it means you cannot, set yourself up for anything. You cannot pre-plan life. And then it just took that extra step that took it away. Like I say, M.R. James has a tendency to do little bits like that as well. So it might be a trait of the time more than anything else.
Yeah. Was Edgar Allan Poe in the times of serialization magazines? He was. He was in contact with Charles Dickens.
Yes.
So I guess
a thing, isn't
it? A bit of that too.
I'm just going to share my letters that I had with Charles Dickens. I mean, talk about name dropping.
Yeah, it is a bit name droppy that. Yeah.
Oh, Charlie boy.
I mean, he was one of the most famous people on the planet at the time as well. Charles Dickens, when he was correspondent.
Yeah, me and Dickers.
But given the chance, you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Just for the story.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Yes. Do you think this is still a relevant fear for people nowadays? Then the whole notion of being buried alive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think it's ever present.
I think that's why most people get cremated.
Dear.
I think it's an inbuilt thing. I think it's the whole, because the whole thing is, if you're cremated, because if you wake up during a cremation, they're going to get you out. And if you don't wake up during a cremation, you're not going to wake up. It's just not going to happen. It's very, very final, a cremation, isn't it? So
you've put a lot of thought into this.
I have actually.
Yeah.
Ever since, and this is why I like the first part of that one. Actually, they were digging up somewhere in Brighton when I was about 14, and we'd moved into the centre of town. And I was talking to one of the builders, and it was an old graveyard that they were digging up, and they were moving the graves. I mean, nobody had been buried there since like 1902 or something like that. So they were moving all the gravestones to the side where the walls were, so that if any relatives wanted to, pay homage, they were still there. But they were actually physically digging up the coffins and moving them. And the amount of coffins they found that had scratches on the inside of the lids, now he might have been doing a bit of hyperbole just to frighten the teenager that was like completely, I was so into the macabre when I was 14. So I was fascinated by anything. Oh, it was a coffin. I had to have a look at it. But yeah, they said that they found scratch marks on the inside of some of the lids.
Oh my!
It's where the vampire mythos comes from as well. The old, the idea of burying people face down. There was always, when they used to bury them about 6 inches under the ground. Right, that's why they bury people 6 foot under. Was because people used to climb back out the ground again. And they thought it was all vampires. So the tradition of burial actually goes with being buried alive. So it's kind of like something that's I think it's a fear that's inbuilt in a lot of people all the way through.
I mean, it wasn't inbuilt in. Well, it wasn't. It hadn't surfaced for a long, long time. You think about things when you're a teenager and when you're a bit younger. But when I was told about that guy being buried in the fireplace last week, I was like, whoa, shivering time. And I'm quite glad I didn't spend some time in that room. But yes,
it's called a primal fear, isn't it?
It's very much a fear, yes. Of course it. God almighty, imagine. But yes, so this book would have been serialized then?
I think it came out in a magazine. It was just. Is it about? It's only about 3,000 words, isn't it?
It's about 30 minutes long, isn't it? So So
but it wouldn't have been serialised. It would have just been in one magazine. Then.
Like the Weird Tales type stuff.
Right, because I was just thinking that maybe the end was extended for the second magazine.
Or it could, you're right. It could have been just sort of like padding and filler because it's unusual rhetorically. He starts off with it's about 4 or 5 stories, different stories relating to being buried alive. And for rhetoric, ordinarily, we would have just sort of like stuck with 3, most of us. I think there might be some padding in there. And I get what Colin's saying about the padding being at the end.
I think he might have ended it with him being buried alive, and someone has looked at it and gone, "You can't do that." Like an editor, a bit like the classic tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was so horrendous and scary and disgusting that his wife burnt it and then he rewrote it. I know it's not true, but the idea that that's what was going on. So you had some editor going, "You can't do that. That's far too much. People will run out." Remember, in the 1940s, people ran out of their homes in America because of a radio adaptation of War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
So I think that's a consideration that editors do sometimes have in terms of, can you just water that down a little bit so people can actually sleep at night? Because if it ended at that point, that would have been so, oh my God, that would have been amazing at that point.
Yeah. And a really good point, actually. A really good point. And which hadn't occurred to me until you said it, but then God, so obvious.
It's
What did you think of the ending, though, Ash?
Say again.
What did you think of the ending, though, Ash?
I actually liked it. I liked it for the fact that it was something different. Instead of it being, and the monster's going to come back and get you, it was just sort of like, somebody actually overcoming their fears and being able to walk away from it. And it's just so unusual. I like the unusualness of it. Yeah,
it's like a psychology PhD kind of study at the end, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, this is what could happen, but this is generally through counselling we can straighten your thoughts and bring them into the real world. And this is what the real world, this is how you should feel about it.
Yeah, it's almost like the guy's gone through implosion therapy and stuff, like faced with worst fear, held the spider or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, completely free of it, which is kind of a nice, happy ending, which you don't see many of in horror stories.
Yeah. No, you don't. And actually, maybe that's why it sits there quite nicely.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't. Yeah, it's no. I'm not going to completely disagree with you, because actually, I don't think it is a question of a right or wrong answer on this one. To be honest.
Yeah, but would that be like disagreeing with Charles Dickens? You know, I mean, at the end of the day, Edgar Allan Poe, and has a reputation.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there's a weight behind it, isn't it? I mean, we have disagreed with Charles Dickens. However much we actually like Charles Dickens, we have disagreed with.
Oh yes, you did, didn't you, with the Railwayman?
Yeah, Railwayman, sack of shit. Yeah,
it was. But we found a lot of joy in parts of. Well, we don't find joy in it. We found skill in it. But there were so many parts of it that were just, not right with it, and I think that's important. I think sometimes we can get held up in certain things and thinking that everything that one artist does can be unblemished.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes it's important.
It pains me to say it, but the Cheeky Girls, not every record that they released was dynamite and gold. There were a couple of duff ones in there as well. I know you're laughing. So no, they didn't do duff ones, actually. Everything they did was brilliant. But yeah, there were a couple of good ones. Yeah. Have Yourself a Cheeky Christmas is not that good, really.
It's not right up there in their catalogue, is it, really?
It's not up there with We Are the Cheeky Girls, no.
Oh, very good, very good.
Well, I think it goes the other way as well. I think there are things like you can get people who declare they don't like things. Like for many years, I declared I didn't like Edgar Allan Poe, which we discussed in our first episode, and it wasn't Edgar Allan Poe's fault. It was actually an old game on an Amstrad that was the fault of it. But there's a lot of Edgar Allan Poe that I really do like now when you go back and visit it. But for me, it's things like Dan Brown. I know a lot of people like Dan Brown. I don't like Dan Brown for many reasons. However, I do like the way he ends chapters. I think so there's always some skill going on there somewhere. And the way the man ends chapters, I think is incredible. Yeah,
there's always a bit of like kinetic energy that takes you on to the next one.
Yeah. And then doesn't write the next chapter about that. So you've got to read another 2 chapters before that gets resolved. The way he makes you read a book is really skillful.
Yeah, that's something I'll have to think about for the old.
Yeah, it is. It's an important mechanism. But like I say, get the story finished first. Right. Well, I think we're a bit. Am I going to say that we're split on this one? I think I'm in the minority on this one. I get the feeling that you enjoyed it, Sean.
Yeah, I did enjoy it, and of course, I'm new to this genre, and hands held high, and I'm learning all the time, and it was a different angle, which didn't really bother me too much. Clearly, Edgar Allan Poe is, someone to be, an author to behold, and so I enjoyed it.
Absolutely, and we will visit Poe again, I think, because I'm thinking that we do need to visit the Pit and the Pendulum at some point, because that is a horrific one of his.
Well, this one frightened me a bit, to be fair. It was a bit spooky, to be fair.
It is definitely spooky. There's no doubt about it.
So, who's picking the next one? What have we got to read? Yeah.
What have we got? Well, I was looking through and I thought, oh, God, there's an old story that I had read, mainly because it was the first one in a book. And sometimes when you get a book of short stories, you always read the first one. You might not make it through to the others because you put it down and start reading something else. So this one, it has 2 titles, actually, to go looking for. The most common title nowadays is Vampire Tower by John Dickson Carr.
John Dickson what, sorry?
Carr, C-A-R-R. You may also find it...
That sounds like a porno.
Well, you're going to like it, I think. Well, I don't know if you're going to like the story, but you'll like him. It's also known as The Dark Tower somewhere. Oh, I can't find it now. Anyway, The Vampire Tower is where you'll find most of it out there, by John Dickson Carr. And it's a bit different. It's a detective story. But horror detective story.
Oh, good. Well, that might come into my little area. Interesting. So, when was it written?
1935. This one.
Oh, okay, perfect. It fits the genre perfectly.
It is right. It's right on the edge of it. I mean, we've slipped into the 50s a couple of times, haven't we? Actually, we did the 60s, didn't we? The Eyes have it. No, not the Eyes.
Yes. And the other one.
The Eyes have it was 50s, and the other one I can't remember the.
Yeah,
the sci-fi.
I have no mouth, but I shall scream.
But
Yes.
I shall scream. That was my 60s. That. But this one, 1935. It has been used as adaptations on the BBC, radio, as well as television. It's been a long, long time since I read it, so I'm looking forward to reading it again.
Oh, good.
Vampire Tower. Right, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
That's brilliant. Until next time.
Bonne chance.
Bye now.
If then.